Welcome back to the Success System Podcast, brought to you by Way Too Spicy and you, our supporters. On this episode, we are finally going to give you a solution to healing your traumas without needing therapy and without needing medication. So if you're someone who is tired of feeling like society, your parents, your school, your friends and families have misled you, if you're tired of feeling like you've been sold a dream and tired of telling yourself that if I can keep chugging along for the next 15, 20, 30 years, I'll be okay, this episode is for you. Or if you're someone who is angry that you did all of the right things, went to all of the right schools, got the right job, only to realize that you were sold a dream, this episode is for you. And if you are tired of feeling like you cannot trust yourself or your own opinion because somebody so many years ago told you that you have nothing of substance to add to the conversation, this is the episode for you. And I want to be the first person to congratulate you because you just found your key and your solution to escaping the mental prison that you have been trapped in. And along the way, you're also going to earn your first class one-way ticket to a abundant, positive, self-loving self-image.
No, love everything that you spoke about. Honestly, I think this episode is going to be really good.
Mm-hmm.
Just because I think we all deal with trauma in some shape or form, and there's different varying levels of trauma. And we're not here to say that this is the type of work that will help with the extreme types of traumas. I think you still need therapists. I think you still need to go and see someone to help you through whatever you're dealing with. But I'm talking about the things that are not extreme, but they're still considered trauma to the individual. And we're going to talk a little bit about ourselves. But before we get into breaking from your trauma and healing your childhood wounds, it's really the first thing that you need to do is awaken from the trance of your traumas. So many of us walk around with our traumas tied to our backs and we carry them everywhere we go. And so that our first step is really understanding, okay, you as the individual. So what does that mean for you as an individual? So one thing that we talk about is consciousness. So I'll even ask Coach TT, what do you think consciousness is? Have you heard like how the split between consciousness and unconsciousness and how most of us operate?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And honestly, I was mind blown when I first learned this because it was surprising to me. And I know a lot of people have no idea, but you essentially have two brains, right? It's
Yeah.
95% of your brain is your subconscious, and we'll get to that in a minute, whereas 5% is your conscious brain. And the real
Yes.
difference between the two is really just in understanding that most of the things you do, you do not have to actively think about doing, right? Think about the times where you're driving to work. Maybe you've worked at this job for a very long time and you really just zone out on the way. Yet somehow you still manage to stop at red lights, not run stop signs, turn where you're supposed to turn, and before you know it, you literally wake up and realize, wow, I made it so much further than I thought I did, right? That is the subconscious really taking over.
Yeah, and going off of what you're saying is like added on to that, you've probably been on your way home. Like I can speak for myself. I'm on my way home. And let's say I'm going on my way to the store, but to the store is the same way to kind of get to my house. If I'm not consciously aware, I'll start to just make turns and go to different places to get to my house without even realize, oh my God, I shouldn't have took that left turn. I should have took the right turn
Mm-hmm.
because now I'm consciously aware that I need to take that right turn, but I took a left because subconsciously I was taking myself home.
That part.
Does that make sense to you?
Oh, yeah, that makes sense to me. Does that make
Yeah,
sense to
and
you?
100% makes sense to me. So coming to that realization is like realizing that we say it's time to awaken. It's really talking that a lot of us are sleepwalking through life, and
Mm-hmm.
it's really just you're aware things are happening, things are going on, but you're kind of just going through the motions, and a lot of it is just second nature until like I wake up, I get my breakfast, I drink my coffee, I go to the gym, then I go to start my work. I start my work. I start with the first thing I always start at work, right? A lot of it is programmed into you as an individual. And so we love this episode with your traumas is that you gotta understand that your traumas are also programmed within you as the individual. And so, to kind of reinforce this, the subconscious and the conscious, I don't know if you guys ever seen there's an image going around about an iceberg, right? And so you can see the tip of the iceberg poking through the water, and what they usually that represent is your consciousness, that 5%, that the thing that everybody sees, that
Mm-hmm.
you are here. But then underneath the water, there's a bigger ice. There's more substance to the ice, to the glacier, because and that's what we see as the subconscious. It's the things that are there but we don't really pay attention to. They're kind of just there in our purview. We're not consciously aware, because remember, 5% conscious, 95% subconscious.
Honestly, I love that analogy, right? Because like it really gives great context to really understanding how impactful your subconscious mind is in terms of dictating the things that you do, right? And a lot of time, it's not what you see that dictates what you do, but it's the things under the surface that are
Yeah,
having that real influence on you, just like that iceberg.
yeah. And so, kind of go in, like, speaking for the audience, what are some of the things that are under the iceberg? I know even like one of your most recent posts on Instagram, you kind of talk about it, like the insecurity, the
Mm-hmm.
anxiety, the constantly judging yourself, the comparison. It really just, whatever, a lot of things can fall into it, and it's not all bad, guys. It's
Oh
understanding
yeah.
that some of it can be good, some of them can be bad, right? And not everything is trauma. Some things are lessons that you've learned and gained wisdom over. But going off of what you were saying is like, what's the importance of actually just having this awareness first and foremost?
I'd say the importance of having this awareness is that you got to come to terms with a lot of the things you do in your actions, your habits, your behaviors are really just a reflection of your subconscious thinking, right?
Yeah,
It's in
yeah,
I'm saying that there are a lot of patterns happening underneath the surface that you may not be aware of, right? And to go back to you bring up my latest Instagram post, for instance, a lot of men struggle with talking about their mental health, right? And that's the conscious thing. That's the thing you see on the surface level. Oh, he's not good at expressing himself, right? But what you're not seeing on that subconscious level is him being bullied as a child, him never feeling like anyone understood him never feeling like he could fit into the world, right? Him battling internal demons in his mind, but you don't see these things on the surface level. All you see on the surface level is, oh, he's not good at expressing himself.
yeah, yeah. I agree with you wholeheartedly on that. Is that we show on the surface level what we want the world to see, or even what we think people want to see, but subconsciously we're living a different life. So it's really two versions of us that are showing up, and the biggest thing is understanding that the subconscious will always override the conscious, because it's 95% subconscious and
Mm-hmm.
5% conscious. And so you gotta understand for yourself is what what would life look like if I was able to tap into my subconscious and start using my subconscious to get the things that I want, instead of falling into habits and patterns that I've lived already before.
Honestly, that is such a powerful question. And guys, if you're listening to this, don't just stop and glaze over this question. Actually take the time and invest in picturing what your life could really look like, right? What would your life look like if you no longer lived based out of that experience you had when you were 9 years old, when someone told you your job in life is to be seen and not heard? Do you think that you would still go through life feeling like you didn't have an important point to make or feeling like you couldn't trust your opinion? Or what if you didn't have that experience as a child where someone told you you have to go to insert this university if you want to be successful? Would you still have attempted to go to that college? Or would you have pursued something else in your life? And the reason that I'm saying this is something that a lot of people fail to recognize is that a lot of the times we have all of this subconscious baggage stored within us, and you are really just walking around carrying these things in your hand, right? You're essentially bearing yourself down in this weight, but you have to examine these patterns and let them go.
Yeah, and having the awareness of just being aware of these patterns. A lot of us don't are not aware of a lot of these patterns, right? We just live our life and thinking, and we have these, we tell ourselves stories in our
Mm-hmm.
own minds, and just being honest, sometimes the stories could be true, but a good majority of the time it's your imagination kind of going running wild. It's like we tell stories, then we project it to other people, and it's like, oh, you were, for example, and I can, going off of a man and a woman dating, it's like, if one of the other is thinking negative things about their partner, at some point, even though they don't got proof, they're just thinking and they feel these things, they're going to project that onto their partner and tell them, well, I feel like X, Y, and Z because of what you did with W. And a lot of the times it's them projecting whatever story they've been telling, whatever they've been feeding their subconscious, and they're trying to make it into a reality. It's realizing that our subconscious programs are our emotional settings, realistically. It's our emotional settings of how we project or how we present ourselves in a day by day. And sometimes we get triggered by a word, we get triggered by an event or an activity. Something causes us to lose our cool and our composure, and we get a little bit irrational. And so we really want to harp on this is understanding that a lot of things, like a lot of time people think to solve their problems, they got to consciously, you know, solve it and they got to fix it. There's some conscious way, but realistically, it's learning to fix the internal because everything is internal. Seek within before you seek outside. Is understanding once you fix the internal, the external will automatically adjust because you're changing who you are at the core, and changing you as who you are as a core will then change your activities and the things that you receive in this world.
Mm-hmm. Well said. So, what does changing these patterns actually entail? You're probably
Well,
wondering,
yeah, yeah. What is it, coach?
right? And the way that we like to break it down for ourselves and also for anyone who comes to us for this type of help is first thing you need to do is really gain awareness of these patterns, right? And the way that you gain awareness is really just by paying attention to the sensations in your body,
Yeah,
right? And I know a lot of times, myself included, when we experience different emotions, our body goes through different sensations, right? When you're happy, you feel happy, right? You may feel yourself fighting back your smiles, right? You might be a little more open body language, right? You might have that pride to you. As opposed to when you're angry, you tend to be a little bit smaller, right? You tend to have that scowl in your brow. You tend to breathe a little heavy, right? Really start paying attention to these sensations in your body so that way you can recognize when you are actually walking into certain patterns. Because I guarantee
yeah.
you, you may not be aware of this, but every time you get mad, your body goes through the same exact experience.
Yeah, it goes to the same pattern that it got saved with the subconscious mind. And if you guys saw our episode, I believe on episode 2, where we talk about the cycle of thinking and feeling, going off what
Mm-hmm.
Coach Hardy was saying, it's like if you see or feel every emotion kind of has a movement associated with it. So with your body, and one of the biggest things that we talk about is really paying attention to your body and learning to relax, but understanding that those emotional sensations are also tied to some thought patterns that you've created in your life. Now, these thought patterns, you may have created them. You may have gone for your mom, your dad, your society, your friends, your school, but they're there and you've given yourself those programs. So it's not like someone told, right? Like, for example, someone may tell you you're ugly and you've internalized it and say, I am ugly because other people have told me I'm ugly, but you're not attent to them. So to internalize that story about you being ugly because somebody else said it is a false story, a false program that you've got put into your own mind, and you're now going to act it out into your reality because of you believe this story about yourself. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
in one instance or another, someone may have said something, but there are opportunities where there are people who are find you attractive. It's just what it is. You're not going to fit in everybody. You're not going to float everybody's boat, right? At the end of the day, it's understanding that all programs get saved into the subconscious, and to start to heal some of that trauma, you have to revisit some of the pain that you've buried deep down and don't ever want to talk about. And so we go through this process of like really just breaking down and leaving down the old version of you to now move forward towards the person that we know and I like to believe is like the higher version of yourself. All right. So we talked a little bit about like what Coach Hardy said is talking about breaking the pattern. So how do you actually go about breaking some of these patterns? What do we actually do? What does that entail in that process? And I talked a little about it, but revisiting some of your past emotional traumas that, right, if you can't talk about them, they have some emotional hold over you. And it's
Mm-hmm.
just what it is. And so your job is really to to be able to deal with these emotional patterns until you can just talk to them freely to anyone, right? Because people, one of the things we've learned is everybody's hurting or insecure about something, and,
Say it
and
again.
so
Say it
everybody's
again for the
hurting or
folks in the
insecure
back.
about something. And so
Mm-hmm.
understanding that we all have our insecurities, just some people hide it better than others. And so understanding when you can come out confidently, talk about where you've been, who you are, and where you're going, then other people can be like, wow, I love your story. It's so inspiring. I want to know what you've done to get to the place that you're at. But a lot of us get stuck because we never deal with our traumas. We never make the goal to actually uncover a lot of the things that we bury deep and down inside. And it's not your fault at the end of the
Mm-mm.
day. It's not your fault. We just weren't given the right tools growing up on how to deal with our traumas. And for a lot of us, especially being from immigrant families, it's like the first generation kind of has to do that on we don't have our parents back. They came from, for us, we can speak from our own personal experience. Our family came from Haiti, where it's really scarcity mindset in the sense of there's not resources. Everybody has to pull their money together. You got to work as a community. And there's no such thing as trauma because, right, survival is the number one. And so it's understanding that, you know, our like people are not going to get your trauma or understand your trauma. It's just what it is. It's like they haven't dealt with their own trauma, so how can they come from a place of empathy to look at what you've been through because they haven't done through what they've done. But they're still hurting. Some of them, not everyone, they're still hurting. They just don't want to talk about it because they're like, I'm good. And not all trauma is bad trauma. Just understand that. Like some trauma is bad. Some of it, some people, to them, it's not traumatizing. It's just normal,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's all perspective. It's all what we tell ourselves as stories or what we assume as what it is for us as an individual.
Absolutely, right. Now that you understand why it's so important for you to really understand your patterns and to gain that awareness, right? It's in the knowing that the patterns that you either are or are not aware of are causing you to take certain actions, right? But once you're aware of the patterns, you now get back your power to choose what actions you want to engage in. For example, just because someone might do something that makes you mad, it doesn't mean you have to explode on them, right?
Yeah.
Because you have the choice to let it go. You have the choice to walk away. You have the choice to explode on them. But most importantly, you have the choice in dictating what actions you want to take. But the problem is, as we said, when you don't go and heal your traumas and unpack that emotion, a lot of times you default to the same patterns you've always taken when you were a kid. And I think we can all agree no one wants to live a life where their trauma is dictating the way that they live. But the problem is, so many people make the mistake of thinking that healing is this impossible, difficult thing that is literally like peeling your skin off and is this excruciating, agonizing thing. But guys, listen close. Healing is easier than you think it is. And as you watch this video, we're going to actually break down how you can start doing your healing right now. This very moment, as you're watching, you can start working on your traumas. You can start unpacking that energy, and you can really start to create that abundant self image that you want to have so that you can start taking the abundant actions to create the life that you deserve.
So how do you do that, coach?
Great question, right? And a big part of that really is in the understanding that clarity comes first. We've been saying it throughout this episode, right? In understanding that you need to understand why you do the things that you do. And I'll be honest, guys, you are going to open emotional wounds when you do this.
The
Speaking
can
from
of worms.
first-hand experience, like it is literally Pandora's box, right? Because once you start digging into your subconscious and unpacking those memories that you stored away in a deep, dark closet because you were a kid who lacked the emotional tools to deal with your problems, you have officially opened the floodgates. But just because the floodgates are open, it does not mean you have to be drowned by your past experiences,
Yeah.
right?
And going off where you go ahead. Yeah.
Oh
No,
no,
I was
so
gonna
go
go
ahead.
off of what. going off what you're saying is like really understanding, like going to that key point is like healing is easier than you think. And I get it. The beginning may be tough to unpack these wounds and they're going to hurt. They're going to sting a little bit at the beginning, but through the exposure of constantly being aware of them and seeing them for what they are, you start to detach yourself as an individual. Now, you might be saying BS, like that's not happening. I dare you to go through your traumas and really break them down. Ask yourself logically, is this rational? Was this a story or an opinion? Was this a fact or an opinion? Was it, really just breaking down your traumas to kind of see where they are? Because once you start to break the legs of irrationality, because what really happens is we put irrational beliefs behind our traumas. It's
Mm-hmm.
not, there's no rationale, right? And like Coach Hardy was saying, is that a lot of these traumas stem from our childhood. So as a child who doesn't know any better, you're not going to do better. You're going to use whatever's available to you in your conscious mind at the time, if that makes all sense.
Oh yeah, 100% right. It's in the knowing that it would be irrational for you to think that as a kid you had everything you needed to understand the situations around you, right? I know a lot of children, myself included, when you come from households that are single parent households, you internalize that blame and put it on yourself, right? You can say that if I was only a better kid, my family would still be together, or if only I was different, then I'd have that perfect family that they show you on Disney Channel every night at 7 p.m., right? But the reality is, as a kid, you have no ability to dictate how your family holds together or severs apart. But the problem is, so many of us tell ourselves stories when we're kids, and we run with those stories for the rest of our lives. And the problem is that when you have these stories that you internalize, that you accept as gospel, and that you never go back to, these are the same stories that you live your life through in adulthood, right?
Yeah.
That's how you get people who they told themselves when I was 7 years old, oh, no one likes me. I'm a loser. I could never be that guy. And now you go through your teenage years where, let's be honest, being a teenager is hard enough as is, right? All of your hormones are out of whack, and teenagers are low-key evil, spiteful people, but that's besides the point, right? And it's understanding that the stories you're telling yourself, you're living them out in reality.
Yeah,
And
not in the way, right, going off what you're saying, right, not in the way that you think. You are living, it's understanding that it's the emotions that are associated with those feelings and their thinking states is what you're living. So you may not have the same experience that caused the trauma, but you're living emotionally that same experience because you've internalized it and you identified with it so much. That, just want to add in to what you were saying.
oh yeah, 100% right. And it's also then going back and understanding in your older years, as you have more understanding, really start to go back through these experiences that you told yourself you'd never overcome because you overcame them. Right? I'm a big believer in being blatantly honest with yourself. Because no matter how many traumatic experiences you had in your life, if you're still alive right now and you're listening to this episode, you have a 100% survival rate, which means you've already, in reality, overcome the story you told yourself that would break you, right? And that's just one example of how you have the power to overcome these stories and really start to dissect, well, what are the patterns that I'm now living out based on these stories,
Yeah.
right? Because if I told myself when I was a kid that I could never be athletic and that I was destined to be a loser, it's no wonder why you become a 24-year-old person who hates the gym
Yeah.
or who does anything possible to avoid physical movement.
And to go off of what he was saying is like I grew up with Hardy, and he brought that example because it's personal experience. He
That was
was
me.
overweight. He didn't think he was
Mm-hmm.
good at sports, but I've seen his transformation in the sense of changing all those internal negatives, those negative patterns and those behaviors, and using that energy to create the life that he wants right now. Like I know if you've been with us on the podcast, we talked about the gym saved his life, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
know a lot of people can connect with that, but it's understanding that your traumas are affecting you in some shape or form in this day and age, and it's your responsibility, no one else's, to deal with them. It could be affecting your relationship, friends, family, whatever it is. But it's understanding once you deal with those traumas, you can turn your trauma into your superpower because it's understanding if they had so much of an effect on you through your day by day, think about your life if you were able to use your subconscious program to do the things that you want in life rather than focusing on things you don't want in life. What would
Mm-hmm.
your life look like? What would you be able to do? How would you move? Would you walk confidently? Would you not feel anxiety and stress as much? Right? These are the things that we love to talk about because understanding we believe wholeheartedly that it is the job of the individual to deal with those internal traumas because it's understanding. I don't know if you guys know this fact is that 95%, and I remember I have to double check it, but I remember reading from a book. It's like a 95% of diseases are caused from stress. 5%
Mm.
is caused genetically. That's wild, right? And so it's understanding that we put ourselves into emotional states based off of the environment that we have told stories about, which could be positive or negative. But it's understanding, okay, understanding that it could be positive or negative. How do I start using that to make it have a positive effect on my life to start going after the things that I want in this life?
Great question. And if I can answer the question, I'd say start by changing the things and the stories that you tell yourself about yourself so that you can change the way that you see yourself in the world, right? Because you may not know this, but you do not experience the world as you are. I'm sorry, you do not experience the world as it is,
Yeah,
you experience the world as you are. And the thing is, if you never go and do the things that you need to do to unpack all of your traumas, then you have zero control over your future because you cannot expect to have control over your future if you are allowing your past to dictate your present.
100%. Say it again. I
You
think that's important.
cannot, okay? For those who didn't hear me or who checked out, pay attention to what I'm about to say. You cannot have control over your future if you continue to let your past dictate your present, because you will continue to create and manifest all of the negative things that happened to you in the past that you don't like, that you have been hiding for, that you have been really burying deep down inside of you, and it's just going to continue to manifest itself into your present. And then it's almost impossible for you to create a new future because you're not doing anything to unpack everything in your past. But
Yeah,
as you begin to unpack everything in your past, you now have the ability to, in real time, impact your present. And it's really
yeah.
when you are intentional with your present that you can actually go and create a future that you love and deserve.
Yeah, and going off of just to add on to that, it's understanding. He said, Coach Hardy said a lot of important things. Is like we all know, and it's been blasted on the internet, is that a lot of us are either living in the past or being anxious about the future, but we're
Mm-hmm.
not being present in the moment. And so we're talking about healing your past traumas because the reason why you're focused on the past is because you're still focused on your traumas. You can only focus on what you see in front of you, which is your past. And that past is dictating how you show up for the future because now you're living the past out in a new version of your life. You're just older now. And so it's understanding that, like Coach Hardy said, is really the present moment is your best friend. So it's in this moment as we deal and unpack the traumas, as we recreate the new programs, as we focus on what we want and not what we don't want, we start to move towards a new vision of ourselves because our focus has changed. We're not focusing on the past. We're focusing on where we want to go rather than where we've been. And that's the key lesson there is really understanding that in starting this process, it's really having clarity on where you want to go in life. Because if you don't have
Mm-hmm.
clarity, you'll just go wherever the wind takes you. Nothing wrong with that if that's what you want. Now, if it's not what you want and you have goals and you have aspirations, you have dreams, then you need to get clear on where you want to go so as you get closer to your goalposts, you can start to adjust and become the person that you need to become to get close to that dream or aspiration.
Without a doubt, because at the end of the day, where your focus flows, your energy will go, right? Which brings up the question, how do you take control of your past so that you can control your future? And the answer lies in turning your trauma into your superpower. What do I mean by that? Have you ever heard the tale of the two lawyers? If not, let me give you a quick rundown, right? There was two lawyers, they were both brothers, and they grew up in an abusive household with an alcoholic father who was never around. When he was around, he was drunk, beating on the kids, beating on the mother, literally just turning their life into a living hell. And their father was a lawyer, so naturally, like a lot of young men, they grew up wanting to be like their dad in that they both grew up to become lawyers. But both of these brothers went on two different trajectories. One brother followed his dad's exact footsteps, became a raging alcoholic, became an abusive husband, an abusive father, and anytime he'd have a conversation with someone and they'd ask him, "Hey, how'd you become like this? Like, what happened in your life to make you binge alcohol like you do, or to beat on your wife like you do?" And he always answered, "Well, my father was an alcoholic, and my father beat on my wife, and my father beat on us, and that's exactly why I do what he does." The other brother, on the other hand, although he also became a lawyer, he lived an entirely different life. He never took a single sip of alcohol. He was a loving and caring father. He made time for his family, and he was a pillar of his community. And people would ask him, "Yo, I love how you live your life. How did you become like this? Like, I'm trying to be like you. How can I aspire to do the things that you do in life?" And he said, "Honestly, guys, my father was an alcoholic. He beat on us all the time. I watched him put hands on my mother regularly. And because of that, I vowed that I would never take a sip of alcohol. I vowed that I would never put a hand on my woman or my child. And I vowed that I would be the exact opposite of him." And the point of this story is that you can have two people go through the same traumatic experiences and live entirely different lives based on how they view and the perspective and labels that they placed on their traumatic experiences. And what
Yeah,
you can
and
take from this, I'm sorry, go ahead, take it
no,
away.
you got that. Finish it up.
So what I
Yeah,
was gonna say is, and what you can take away from this is that all of your traumatic experiences are similar to these two brothers and their alcoholic father. You can place negative labels on your life and say that I'm destined to do this, I have no choice, my circumstances set me up for this disaster. Or you can flip the script, turn the page, and say, no, because this traumatic thing happened to me, I'm not going to let it control my life. I'm going to set my own path. I'm going to be my own man or woman. But it all starts, like we were saying, with the words that you tell yourself about you and your place in the world.
yeah. And if you guys have been listening through and you're here at this point, 35 minutes in, then I'm assuming you've made the decision that you're willing to do whatever it takes to be the version of yourself that you love, you like, and you can show up every day.
Mm-hmm.
And with that respect, it's understanding that there's only one thing that's in your control is your choice. You get to decide. You get to decide. And, I love Seven Habits of Highly Effective People, but it's really deciding to react to what you've always known and what you always done and how you always move, or to respond in the proper way that will help you get closer to being the ideal version of yourself. It's understanding that reacting is not fun. Being pulled by your emotions is not fun. Living a life just being a victim to your traumas is not fun. If anybody
Mm-hmm.
says it's fun, they're bullshitting you. Like, we were unhappy because we were letting our emotions and our traumas take over. But it's understanding once we had the control to decide and make different choices for ourselves, it's like you can't blame anybody. There is no blaming anyone because
Mm-hmm.
you've decided to take ownership. And that's the first step that we have everybody come to conclusion is taking ownership of who you've been in the past and taking ownership of who you're going to be in the future.
1000%. I could not have said it better myself, because at the end of the day, it is always going to be on you to take ownership of creating the life that you want, and also to take ownership of how you got to where you are right now. Because although you may not be responsible for what hurt you, what harmed you, the traumatic experiences that you went through, you are 100% responsible for your healing. You are
Yes.
100% responsible for creating the life that you want to have. And you are 100% responsible for the example or the warning that you turn your life into for the people around you that you interact with every single day.
Yeah. And, want to just summarize really, it's like going back to the keys, like how do we start to heal our trauma? And do you need outside resources? Now, if you find that you need a therapist, go look for a therapist. If you find you need a coach, go look for a coach. Find whatever resources that you need for yourself. For us, we did a lot of the work ourselves. We
Mm-hmm.
taught ourselves, we educated ourselves, and we also used each other as to kind of reflect back some of the lessons that we were learning and to see how they've affected. Like, creating your community is so key. there's so many ways of going about it, but it's understanding you got to start somewhere, right? I think
Facts.
therapy is a great place to start for a lot of people, but I don't think it's the place to go longevity wise. And I say this because even with some of the clients that we spoke with, like they all had therapists. They're all dealing with the problem. But the biggest problem that they find was that, yeah, they could talk about the problem, they're aware of the problem, but there was no action steps or strategies to start to remove the problem from their point of view, that it no longer affects them, and start to create the new life that they want. And we talked about it in this episode: clarity, clarity, clarity. Because whatever you're getting rid of needs to be replaced by something else.
Mm-hmm. Without a doubt. So with that, we're actually going to give you some steps that you can begin to take right now yourself. No therapist needed, no medication needed, no outside sources needed, so that you can start to unpack your trauma, start to really engage in your own healing, and really start being the person that is capable of having the life that you've always dreamed of having. Right? And the first thing you need to learn how to do is to overcome your emotional state. We've talked about it at large in this episode. If you do not take ownership of your emotions will treat you like a rag doll, and they will toss you every which way, whether you like it or you don't like it. Right? And
Yeah,
if you're wondering why is it important to control my emotions, think about the last time you were angry, someone pissed you off, they triggered you, and that allowed you to step outside of your character and do something that you wouldn't have otherwise done.
yeah,
Unless you like being swayed by your emotions, unless you like giving people the ability and power over you to make you do whatever they want, you have to gain control and ownership of your emotions.
yeah. And we talked about it a lot in this episode, but really it's understanding where those emotions come from, what thoughts are associated with those emotions. What do you feel like? What sensations are you
Mm-hmm.
feeling, right? It's really just getting super clear about that. And that's one of the things that we actually talk. We have our own system. It's called, and we created this system not to be the end all be all of solving this problem, guys. That was not the goal. It was really to give you a guidepost to always look at whenever you get yourself emotionally, frustrated. And we call it bio. Check out our episode 2, how to master your emotions. Where we break our system down so that you can start being aware. I'll run through it quickly. It's bio, and it's really what's your biology. And so, we talked about first managing your emotional state, managing your body. The B stands for body. It's really just taking focus of what's going on, your sensations, um, and the feelings. Like if you're getting hot, you're breathing. Really, just being aware of who you are in that state. Because when you're in that emotional state, the best time to change that state is when you're in it, not after the fact when you're like, oh, I let myself go out of control or that. No, the best time to change it is when you're in it, because that's when you start to break the patterns and start to recondition a new pattern. And
Mm-hmm.
and but I'm only going to talk about the B because that's where the step one is really just managing your body, right? Really managing your emotional state. And what we already talked about it, being aware of the patterns and the things that are the cycles that you've been through.
Of course. And if you want to know what the I and the O is about, go check out our episode on how to master your emotions, because we gave you systems, we gave you gems, and we gave you nuances from our experiences and the experience of working with our clients. But once you've really started incorporating this biosystem and knowing how to overcome your emotions, now it's time for you to really start recognizing the patterns of who you don't want to be.
Yeah,
Because one of the most important things for you to do in healing your trauma is breaking the pattern of who you no longer want to be. And the reason you have to break the pattern of who you no longer want to be is because, contrary to popular belief, when push comes to shove, you will not rise to the occasion. You will always fall to the highest level of your preparation. And for most people, that is the same patterns that they have been allowing to run rampant for years,
yeah.
right?
And
And one
mhm,
and one of the things that we use to help ourselves and also our clients and recognize their patterns is the best self and the worst self exercise, so that you can really lay out how you see yourself. Like, what are the patterns that you engage in that don't serve you at all, right? Because we all have patterns that we hate, ourselves included. I'm not going to sit here on a high horse and tell you that I'm perfect and I don't have things that I hate that I still do, because it would be bullshit. And we're not here to lie to you, right? We're not here to gatekeep. We just want to really give you tools that you can actually engage in starting right now to really start unpacking and breaking down that person you don't want to be.
Yeah, and to add on to what Coach Hardy said, it's understanding it's not an activity you do once and like, okay, I'm done, I fixed.
Mm-mm.
It's an activity you do ongoing because a lot of the stuff that you've internalized, you push down. You don't even pay attention to them. They become part of you, become second nature. And so as you're doing this work, as you're uncovering patterns and behaviors, you're going to start to see where they come from and be like, wow, like a memory from when you were 7 years old will pop up into your mind and you're like, damn, like I forgot this even happened because it was so traumatic to you that you've internalized it, that your subconscious mind at the time pushed it to the side to make you feel safe and secure.
100%, right? And it's also understanding like healing is not a linear process, right? That's part of why we
Mm-hmm.
tell you to do this, to do these activities over and over again, because healing is a spiral. And the point of healing like a spiral is you're going to face the same traumas that hurt you and harmed you over and over again, but you get a different, nuanced, deeper level of understanding every single time, right? So if you are interested in doing the best self, worst self exercise, we actually gave you a great introduction to it in our first episode of this season. But if you don't want to go through the first episode, we also do have it available in our Prosperity Playbook pack. It's one exercise we give to all of our clients when we first start. But I'm going to be very honest with you. One of the biggest issues we see when we give people this exercise is that people tend to only stick to the surface levels of who they are. And it's
Yeah.
totally understandable, right? It's not their fault. It's really just understanding a lot of people don't take the time to sit down and figure out who they are when they strip themselves of all of the labels society has placed on them, right? And that's really where having an objective person who's gone through this activity help you, because then you have someone who is actually willing and able to challenge you, not to make you feel dumb or to make you feel like you did the exercise wrong, but to really challenge you to be the person that you said you wanted to be, right? At the end of the day, you're watching this episode because there's something that you have in your life that you are tired of carrying. You're tired of being bogged down, right? And if you want to take that weight off your back and create this mental space to attract what you want in life, it's okay to have an outside source be there and to help guide you along the way.
Yeah. Yeah. And going off of what you're saying, and excuse me, and it really goes into our step four is understanding once you're able to do this process, it's really understanding where do you want to go from here. It's a lot of us don't know where we want to go. A lot of us don't know what we want to do. A lot of us don't know how we're going to make an impact in life. And I want to speak to those individuals that are really hurting and feel like that they are meant for more, right? The reason why a lot of us start this self-development work is because we believe we are meant to do more. And I know you are meant to do more because it's a calling from within. But a lot of the times that what stops us is our limiting beliefs and who we are. And so I would challenge you as you're doing with the best self or self exercise is in the best self, really start to create a vision of yourself of who you want to be. And I would expand it 5 years because for a lot of people it's hard to swallow what they can get done within a year. So why don't you
Mm-hmm.
spend it for 5 years? What can you get done within 5 years? And if it's one thing that you got done that's so important to you, bro, that's successful. You gotta
Mm-hmm.
understand that. A lot of us don't even pay attention to the things that we want, and so we never get them. And some of them have these fleeting dreams and these ideas, and we're excited about them in the moment, but then, they after going through life, going through the cycles, going through the patterns, we forget them. It's like it's just life. We get sidetracked and busy by other things that we forget the goal. Why are we here? We're not here to work, get drunk on the weekends, and start the whole cycle again. It's like we're here to do something in our lives. There's a purpose to your life, and it's figuring out what that purpose is for you. And I think we're still figuring out our purpose, right? Just because we're putting content on doesn't mean we figure out purpose. We have a better and we're more confident and certain on what our purpose is and where we need to go. But it's constantly evolving as we expand the vision of ourselves. And we said it before. 5 years ago, we would have never done any of this stuff or even be
Mm-hmm.
talking to you guys about any of this stuff because it wasn't something that was in the game plan. It's like we were just going with the flows of life, like everybody else. Go to school, go to college, get a degree, go get a job, work, go out, have family, start, right? It's just like the same cycle we all been given. But honestly, for us, we're like, no, we want to do more, right? And the traditional American dream is not for me. It's like I have my own dream. What's my dream? I'm going after it. But in order to get that dream, I have to become the best version of myself. And what I mean by the best version of myself is that I have to stop focusing on the worst stuff about myself and focus on the best stuff because it's already there. Is that
Mm-hmm.
our perspective and our focus is usually on the negatives and not the positives.
Absolutely. And I think that is a great place to really end and close out this episode. So, guys, if you're watching this on YouTube and you found value, make sure you click that like button, subscribe for more, and don't be a gatekeeper. If you know someone who could gain insights or who this episode could help, share the episode with them. If you're listening to this episode on Spotify, if you like our content, go ahead and leave us a review. Heck, if you hate the content, go and leave us a review because we are always looking to find ways to improve our content to give you the best possible experience. And if there was something that we went over in this episode that you are personally struggling to get over, reach out to us because we are here to help you. We want to be a resource to help you. We have tools and systems to make it easier for you to get to where you want to go with so much less effort than just figuring it out on your own. Right? If you want to know
Yeah.
how to get in contact with us, you can reach out to us on our podcast page on Instagram at Success System Podcast. You can send us an email at the SS Podcast at waytoospicy.com. That is 3 O's and a 2. Or you can reach out to either one of us individually on our socials. Myself, you can find me on Instagram at I am Hardy Jean. That is I-A-M like Marie, H-A-R-D like David, Y-J-E-A-N as in Nancy.
Yeah, and you can find me on IG, Coach Amadeus, Amadeus.
And as always, guys, this has been the Success System Podcast. We are Way Too Spicy, and we will see you next time.
Deuces. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I think this was a really good convo. It was a great episode. So leave some comments. Let us
Mm-hmm.
know what you thought. We would love to know if there's certain topics, certain issues that you've been dealing with and how we can help. Let us know. We're here to help.
Without a doubt. And if you want to be on an episode, reach out to us because we would love to have you, and we'd love to hear you share your story and see how we
Yeah.
can continue to be a resource for you.
Ba-da-ba.
Pow.
Call it a day.